All right, that ought to do it. So I think I've got everybody connected properly, except my mouth to my brain, and we can get started. So just because my voice is the one that started, by way of quick introductions, I am with the Pediatric Solutions team here at PCC, and in a previous life, I worked in 2 hospitals as well as a handful of private practices in the last almost 30 years. Doing everything from medical assistance to billing to credentialing to provider relations to professional support, all kinds of good stuff. So I've learned a thing or two, so I hope to share a thing or two. And I invite our guest, Heidi Chamberlain, to do the same.
Thank you, Jan. I'm Heidi. I've been with PedsOne for coming up on 7 years. Prior to that, I did billing in orthopedics in Phoenix for a total of 15 years now of billing.
Wow. So you've learned a thing or two as well.
A little bit.
And hey, Lynne, for the 2 people that are going to watch this that don't know you.
There's a whole 2 people watching? Woohoo! One's Tommy. Hi, Tommy.
Hi, Tommy.
I've been at PCC for coming on 30 years. It would have been 30 had the conference actually been in July, but now it's not quite 30. So I work on the new client implementation team. So I work with all of the new clients that purchase PCC, and they get to see my smiling face in Zoom meetings on a weekly basis. I started out, gosh, we don't want to talk about that, in programming, but I've moved my way into the support arena, and I've been working with pediatric practices, I don't know, 28 of my 38 years at PCC, maybe 29. So I'm not a certified coder. I'm not a biller. I just know enough to be dangerous. Right, Jan?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you make a good point, though. Even you don't have to be a coder to be a biller. And this whole session is all going to be about, coding is helpful, but you don't have to be certified to be a good biller. Awesome billers do it every day. So this session, in addition to, solely is going to be all about the questions that you guys have. We want to give you guys guidance and support for AR collections. We recognize that the public health emergency has thrown some wrenches in that. And I fully expected a complete halt to grind as relates to payments coming in. But we do have some clients that are reporting that patient payments are up in some cases. So sociologically, I just find this entire time fascinating. So I'll be interested to see what you guys think and what your experiences are as relate to personal payment trends and some things that you're seeing. Of course, we're going to answer all of your questions. So please do load them up in the live session chat so that we can be sure that we get them right, and we'll read them out and answer them to the best of our ability. And we also want to crowdsource some of the challenges that you guys have, even if you don't have a specific question. If you're discovering that something unexpected has gotten harder to do in the last few weeks, or even of course, our focus is COVID, just because that seems to be what everybody's mind is on and what everybody is adapting to and addressing and adjusting for. But there aren't any AR questions that are off the table. If there's a particular situation that you're finding difficult to navigate, see if somebody on the call or in the session has a suggestion. We'll pass those along as well. So in preparation for this, some of the things that I had wondered, I started to look through questions that I've received recently and what seems to be on folks' minds. And it does, because I'm the source for, one of the sources for PCC of CPTs and ICD guidance, that has been the focus of what has been asked of me. Do either of you have anything off the top of your heads, or what's most prevalent in the questions you guys have been getting over the last 2 months? I'll ask you, Heidi.
Yeah. The last 2 months have essentially been telemedicine focused, and the biggest challenge is that each payer seems to want things differently, whether it be the place of service or the modifier that goes on it, which diagnosis codes are going to be 100% covered, which diagnosis codes are still going to go to patient responsibility, how are we going to handle the patient questions when they come in expecting it to be fully covered. So that's kind of what we've just been dealing with over the last 2 months, I guess, coming up on 3 now.
That's been the lion's share of the questions for us as well. It's so hard too, because I feel like a broken record saying it's up to your payer. It's up to your payer. You're really going to need to, but we've seen every permutation of 95 versus GT modifier. It was really funny to look at PCC data. The team that I work with, we are avowed data nerds, and looking over the payment requirement trends and just, the critical mass of what carriers are looking for, there is no critical mass. It seems to just be somebody's throwing a dart at a dartboard that's got modifiers and CPTs on it for telemedicine. It's so it's frustrating to not be able to say this is a silver bullet. This is going to get you paid. How about you, Lynn? What are you hearing?
The same thing. I actually have, I have questions for the clients. How are you guys collecting your copays? Are you collecting copays, especially for those telemedicine visits? We sent out a short survey to a few clients, literally a few clients. And it's interesting to see those that are, yes, we collect a copay every time, and others that are saying, we're not collecting any copays and we'll just bill them if we need to. So that's also payer based, and how many people are thinking to track that? What insurance companies are saying, we're not taking copays for telemedicine visits. But we are taking copays for in-office sick visits. So that's one of the questions I've been asking clients about, because that fascinates me, what they're doing with those copays.
Yeah, speaking of copay collections, I wonder what you guys think of the opportunity that telemedicine, the prevalence of telemedicine, has presented to one of the recommendations that I know, Lynn, I know you and I with PCC make this recommendation all the time. So I'll ask Heidi, in terms of credit card on file, that is one of the options, that looks to me like an opportunity. That is something that we've been pushing for a while, and trying to make resources available to help people adopt a credit card on file policy. Is that something that you see value in, Heidi?
Absolutely. I think having that credit card on file just streamlines everything. The parents don't have to worry about calling in, sending in a payment. If it's right there and they know they're going to have to pay that copay, it's easy for the office to be able to run it, no hassle. I think right now, with all of the challenges and there's more paper bills going out, essentially that's going to cost more money at the end of the day. You're sending a bill for a copay that you would have essentially collected at the beginning of the office. You're paying more money for that. So if you have a credit card on file, that kind of takes away the paperwork for the staff, minus the cost of actually sending that out, postage and everything right there.
Oh, I love that. So that's not just bringing money in, that's keeping money in that you would have otherwise paid.
Yeah, the other point is it's touchless. So there's no handing a credit card off to somebody. That's actually one of the questions we asked, is, are you starting to take advantage more of credit cards on file for this specific purpose? They don't have to hand you anything and possibly get germs back when you hand it back. The other thing to keep in mind is the portal payments. I verified with Erica Greenwood, who did the design on the portal. Can you post copays in the portal, patient portal, if there's no balance on the account? And yes, you can. So if you're not encouraging people to store credit cards on the portal and make copays on the portal, that's another way that you can get them. So we have that touchless thing going on, so they're not sharing anything with you and you're not inadvertently sharing back.
Great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we've got some love in the live session chat for portal payments. So we're not alone in thinking they're pretty hot stuff. But Lynn, can you specifically, just because this is a software question, Lynn, what is the recommendation for where to store those credit card numbers?
All right, they should be storing that in the portal. You should not be storing your credit card numbers in their system. God, no.
So can just quickly distinguish the portal from the system. What do you mean by that?
All right. So the portal, when you store credit cards in the portal, you're actually not storing it in the portal. You're not storing it in PCC. It's actually being stored by a company that knows all the banking regulations and all the requirements needed for storing credit cards. All we get back is a little token number that we store in our database, and that token allows us to say, charge this credit card that you have stored in your system. So we want them to store their credit cards on the portal if possible. Now, if you're doing credit cards on file, that doesn't mean file cabinet. That was an off the cuff joke. Wow, I got to keep that for my course. And I do know of clients who actually store credit cards in a file cabinet. No, I don't care if it's locked. That's not where it belongs. Your bank probably gives you that ability to store credit cards on file, your merchant services. There are plenty of companies out there that will allow you to charge credit cards and store those credit cards online. You should not be storing them in your office. They should be stored in a secure website.
Well said. And if I'm not mistaken, the portal is capable of storing multiple credit cards?
Yes.
So
I don't know if there's a limit, but yeah, it went from 1 to now multiple.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember attending a demo recently where the patient could choose between
Yes.
more than one or two or more. I don't remember if there's a limit either.
If anyone knows, they can, pop it up on the chat for us to know.
That would be awesome. And there is a question, do you have to enroll with PCC for this service? As Lynn said, if you want to store them, have the patient store them in their portal, you do have to be using the PCC patient portal for that. But as she said, your merchant services, your bank, the people that, often it's the people that provide that POS device, the account that you have with them for processing payments may also offer a secure credit card storage option. So you've got several opportunities there. There is a practice that is collecting copays at check-in from the car when at all possible. It was instituted this week, and they're doing a next day follow-up for folks that have had a telehealth visit. They're checking in just to say they wanted to follow up on the visit yesterday. They get feedback from the patients and find out how telehealth is working. And it allows that gives them another opportunity, another touch point with that patient to discuss balances and to collect copays. So it's either by telephone or directing them to the website for portal payment. And patients have been receptive to that. That was my mistake. That was not typed. And it's really good public relations. So this practice is making opportunities to reach out to patients. So they're turning payment and reconciliation into an opportunity to follow up and say, hey, we're thinking of you, we care about you. No shortage of opportunities, no shortage of reasons to make more opportunities like that right now. But that practice does not do the credit card on file. So they're using, they're using this opportunity to reach out as opposed to streamlining that as part of the check-in. So as you can imagine, Payment Pros, one of the vendors that has a channel here, is all over this. So they are one of the opportunities, in addition to your vendors, your credit card merchants, and Payment Pros does have one of those opportunities. They are one of the vendors that offers this service.
And they are who we use for the portal payments. So
see, so it all
links back together.
Indeed. Okay, so speaking of reaching out to folks, there is a session later this week on recaller strategies, and it's a course that'll be taught by Chip Hart. In general, that tends to be about clinical recall. Do you guys see do you, Lynn or Heidi, see any value in reaching out to patients that have past due balances differently? Or do you have, differently in the age of COVID, but COVID or otherwise, what do you guys find are the best tips and tricks for making contact with patients to collect a balance? Are there things to do, things not to do?
Go Heidi.
Okay, I'll go. So I haven't stopped reaching out to patients, but my approach before the whole COVID thing was maybe a little bit more aggressive, whereas now understanding that people are out of a job, money is tight, but at the same time knowing that we have to keep these practices running. So when I call for past due balances, immediately I'm offering payment plans, and maybe the payment plans are going on a little bit longer than we typically like to see. You know what? We like to have balances paid off in 3 months. Maybe now we stretch them to 6 months, or we start with a smaller balance and say, in maybe 3 months you can pay the remainder off, or we'll just take it step by step. So just immediately letting them know we understand it's a sensitive time, but at the same time, we can't stop collecting these balances. So that's kind of been my approach. I've had a really good response from it. I haven't had anybody really upset by that. And most people are either willing to pay the whole thing or definitely wanting to set up a payment plan.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's not the go out and give us all your money now atmosphere right now. Payment plans make the most sense. I do have a practice that when they call for their telemedicine visits, they're actually asking for outstanding balances as part of that call. I'm sure they're not saying you have to pay in order to get our appointment, but they are trying to collect that money as part of the call. Um, I had another thought. I also had a client mention that they're using or speaking with patients' parents about care credit. Is that the name?
Hmm.
There's
I'm
a,
not sure.
yeah, care something. Somebody
It's
finish the thought
care
for me.
credit. Yeah. People
Yeah,
keep
it is care
their
credit.
veterinary bills and stuff too. It's
Yeah,
not an
that's
insurance, but it's like a credit card that's solely based for medical balances.
right. And yeah, I don't know any information other than it is something that practices can reach out to their patients if they're having problems paying. Yeah, it's
I've not
another
heard
way.
of that before. So
It's at the vet.
Yeah, you can use it at the vet's office.
That's the only place I've actually seen it is at the vet. So when this practice brought it up, I was like, oh yeah, the vet thing.
Mhm.
Wow.
But
Oh,
it works
that's
for
awesome.
people too, I guess.
Mhm.
Well, good. Hopefully we can get a link to it or some more information that we can share in the live session. A lot of dental offices use it apparently.
Yes.
There's someone saying in live chat.
Yeah.
Well, cool. One of the ideas that I hesitate to say, just because everything feels so heightened and so sensitive, but as you say, Heidi, we can't stop collecting. You know, the practices have to go on. If any of these practices shutters, there's a whole host of kids that just don't get care. So in that light, the idea that the U.S. economy is not moving in a great direction compels me to say that if you're going to reach out to patients, do it sooner than later, simply because so many businesses that are still employing patients' parents and patients themselves may not be in the future. And if you can be one of if you can get those balances resolved sooner than later, you might be catching them before they're unable to pay. So if you think you're holding off just out of a sense of sensitivity, hopefully a sense of survival, or that we can add some urgency to this and implore people to try to collect those sooner than later, just for that reason alone. We already talked about portal payments. Another, I'm sort of going to switch gears here a little bit because I'm a firm believer that account receivable strategies include hanging on to money. I attended a webinar long before COVID. It was probably October, November, where a lawyer gave attendees the skinny on how carriers, some of the goofy things that they do to try to create loopholes where there were none. And one of those loopholes that they try to exploit is the idea that they can pay a claim in a timely fashion, but then recoup the money and hope that you never argue the recoupment. So they're skirting prompt pay laws by paying what you think you're due, and then you go to bed that night thinking that everything's been covered and you've reconciled the claim, only for them to come back and take perfectly legitimate payments back again. And you know how they do it. They keep it and they take it from what would have been a payment for a future claim. So all those takebacks and withholds and all those kind of things. Do you guys have any specific ideas or advice as relates to dealing with takebacks, or any particular challenges that your practices, that your clients and practices have with takebacks, or interesting stories? Do you want to start, Heidi?
So many stories. The first thing I need to tell you is that just make sure, no matter what state you're in, you check the state recoupment laws, because I've billed for Pennsylvania. They don't have one. There is no timely. They can come back 6 years and ask for a recoupment. California is 1 year. So just keep an eye on your state's timely filing for recoupments, and you should be able to find that easily through a Google search. And then check the date of payment, because typically it goes off of a year, 3 years from the date of payment. And then research every single thing before you just voluntarily give that money back, because a lot of times they will recoup something or ask for a refund and the reason is not legitimate. They'll say, member was termed at the time of service. You run eligibility, they're totally fine. And then you call and you question that refund and they'll quickly say, oh, let me withdraw that refund request. They will do anything just to get their money back. And you just have to make sure that you don't put aside those refund requests or let them recoup it without making sure everything is absolutely valid. The other thing is if you do get a refund or a recoupment and then you find out the patient had another insurance at the time of service, but now 6 months have gone by, maybe the timely filing for the other insurance that was active has gone by, you can try to appeal that by using your initial submission to the original insurance as a timely filing. I've had a lot of success with that. It sounds like they wouldn't pay it, but they will. But just my biggest advice is just don't take it with a grain of salt. Look into every single thing to make sure that that money is due back to them.
I love your answer. And I really love that idea about using the primary timely filing. I wouldn't have thought to do that. I would have assumed that the secondary would not accept it, but it shows your due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. How about you, Lynn?
Yeah, I like that idea of using the primary as well. That's kind of cool. Oh, your water bottle just disappears in the background, Jan. That was kind of scoop.
A little warm in here. You'll have to forgive me.
No, I hear you. I agree. I have clients that they had so many takebacks on their ERAs. I'm just like, is something wrong with our system? Are we submitting things? And the biller was like, oh no, that happens all the time. And I'm just like, what do you mean it happens all the time? I mean, far more takebacks than I've seen at any other new client, not a startup, a new client. And I think that you're right, Heidi. Most people just say, okay, and just go on with their life. And they don't question the insurance company because why would you question the insurance company? Because they're the insurance company. You should always question them. I wouldn't trust them to do the right thing ever. So I'm just going to echo what Heidi says. When you get those takebacks, verify they should be taking back the money. Just don't, if you're not, you're doing exactly what they want you to do, which is just leaving it alone because, it's only $30. What do we care? Well, it's $30 10,000 times a year. It's going to add up if you don't question why they're doing things.
Yeah, and there's good support in live session for that as well. Challenge recoupment requests. I love it. That must be one of your recent clients, Lynn.
No, that's not. I see they don't have last names or their practice, but if it's Angela from Tamalpais Peds, it is a client, but I don't know.
Good.
I wish you guys had your practice names as part of your name, and then I would know who you are or where you're from.
That same person had a great idea. Jumping back to the previous topic, I didn't catch it before we moved on, that requesting past due balances as part of a tax refund or stimulus funding payments is an opportunity that when you recommend something like that, it doesn't feel so much like you're asking for their day-to-day, for their grocery money, the things that are keeping them going. If they're lucky ones that still have paychecks coming in, then framing it that way can bring some success. I like that idea a lot too. So when we talk about not rolling over and not accepting the responses or even the takebacks that carriers, the responses to responses that carriers put folks through, do you guys have any advice on appeals? Or actually, more so than advice, Lynn, is it easy for you to do a quick poll and see if the folks in live session chat, just ask a yes or no question, if people feel like they are submitting appeals on a pretty regular basis? Do they feel comfortable with it? Is one yes or no? And I guess that's probably the crux of my question is, yes, show of hands, who is comfortable? Are you comfortable submitting appeals? Do you feel like you have a good handle on appeals?
Oops.
So we'll
Let me not make a typo though. Bam, there it is.
Gosh, you're good. I love those. So if you guys are in live session, I would love to know your answer to, look at that, the votes are coming on in. Are you submitting appeals and are you okay with how you're doing it? So that's 2 yes or no questions in a single question. So answer the one that you like best.
Yeah, answer one of them. Yeah. Well, you
In
gave me
Lynn's
the two
defense,
questions.
I know. In Lynn's defense, I totally dropped this right in her lap for the fun of it because life's exciting like that.
Yeah, you're the best.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
there's only 11 people here, I guess. That's the only votes we got.
no, they're still coming in. There's lots of people. So we'll let folks get their answers in through.
Just this is a warm up by Jan's doing for you guys, by the way, because my session this afternoon is going to have polling all during it. So be ready for those polls.
Keep your clickers handy.
That's right.
So that's going to go on through for a while. We'll let those answers pile up, and then we'll revisit those in a little while because I'm going to need Lynne to teach me how to revisit them. One of the reasons that I was particularly interested in appeals right now is because my sense is that policies are changing and morphing so quickly right now, with state requirements coming into play, with federal regulations being relaxed. It feels like the carriers are, just as much as they're all over the map with coding requirements, their policies are flexing and moving and morphing. So I see an opportunity coming to to hold them to their word. And I think appeals are probably the best way to do that, because in a course that I taught last week, the importance of knowing effective dates of these policies and of these changes and the relaxation of some of these requirements, that's going to mean all the difference. So knowing how your service date, how any service date in question compares to the effective dates of the policies and when they were in play and versus when the service was rendered, that's going to be paramount in this. So if I had any advice for appeals, it would be get a really solid handle on the changes that are happening in your policies. Most big payers, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but most big payers have either bulletin systems or websites where they issue news updates. And so it's pretty dynamic, and it can be quick, it can move pretty quickly. So get good at appeals. Like if we get a lot of no's in that, are you submitting it or are you okay with it? I'm going to strongly recommend that folks share letters with one another. If you find that there's wording, one of my favorite things to do with appeals is to get into the AAP website and look at some of their position papers. So depending on the reason for the denial, the AAP has a lot of position papers on why, for example, why screening should not be bundled with well care. So if you get a bunch of denials like that, you've got wording from the entity that governs clinical quality for your specialty, and PEDS is a specialty, that supports why it's important to do screenings at the time that you do well care. And you've got AMA's support. There is language right in CPT to say that E&M services, of which the preventive care is included, that technically, that they are distinct from screening codes, and screenings done at the time of other E&M services should be coded and billed separately. So I wanted just to make that point. If you're not in the habit of doing it right now, or if you feel like you need to brush up or you could use some help with your appeal letters, reach out now before the public health emergency dates expire, before things start to quote unquote opening up, and before the carriers start changing their policies again to say that they're not going to be as forgiving. That now in my opinion is the time to really get that stuff in line.
Can I piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Lynn.
No, go ahead.
The other suggestion I have too is don't give up. So a lot of times you send 1 or 2 appeals for the same reason to the same insurance company, it comes back denied. And a lot of billers are like, all right, well, that's just the way it is. That's just how their benefits are. I'm not going to waste my time. Waste your time, because eventually it will pay off. There was a huge time where dental varnish wasn't being paid, and I sent an appeal on every single one. And I think they finally just got sick of seeing my name and they're like, oh my God, we'll just pay for it at this point. So if that persistence will pay off, and the fact that they are always changing and benefits do change and the edits do change all the time. So something that maybe wasn't payable a month ago is now payable. So just don't take that as the final answer when you do your appeals. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many new clients at a very early part of the configuration, we asked them about their physical schedule. And so many still are not doing the 30-month physical because nobody pays for it. And I'm just like, wrong. Lots of people pay for it. Yeah, just because they didn't pay for it 3 years ago doesn't mean they're not paying for it now. Screenings are a big one. I have completely stolen a zero payment report that PedsOne uses for new clients to say, these are the things that they're not paying. You need to ask them why. Well, that's bundled, is it? Because they're so used to just thinking, oh, it's bundled, they're not going to pay for it. I'm not going to appeal. It's a waste of time. Well, yeah, you're never going to get paid if you never appeal. You're never going to get paid if you don't charge it, right, Jan? You gotta submit the claim, because if they decide to pay it 6 months from now, and you haven't submitted it, you're not going to get paid for something you never submitted. So submit it, and if it's a $0 payment, you really need to question it. If you don't have a zero payment report on your system, it's very easy for us to set it up for you. It literally will give you a list of all the $0 insurance payments. So that allows you to use your auto posting to auto post everything, and then you run the report to find out what things auto posted as a $0 payment, so you can find out why.
You can also use that report for full pay to find out all the things that are paying at 100%.
Yeah, that's
your fee.
Yeah, that's the RV. I make them run the RVU report, and I'm like, you're at 80%. That's not cool. You need to increase your prices. You're getting paid 100%. Yeah. Getting paid, if you're getting paid more than 80% for something, chances are you're not charging enough. And I know it seems crazy to just raise charges because one insurance is paying more than everyone else, but no, it's not. Get what you can get. Yes, you'll have higher adjustments from other insurance companies potentially, but who cares? If it brings you an extra $50,000 a year from that one insurance company, do it. I might be exaggerating numbers, but still. I've had so many clients where after 6 weeks, we start seeing auto payments, and I start seeing 90, 95, 100% payments. And I'm like, you so need to raise your price now. Yep.
Amen, sister. Yeah, there's no, you can't overstate the power of volume in this argument. One of the examples I like to use is, does everybody remember when no one was paying for after hours care? Guess what folks are paying for now? There are Medicaids that are paying for after hours care, weekend holiday care. Once was a time people were not billing that because they didn't get paid for it. But if you were one of those folks that wasn't billing for it, you also don't get the benefit of backdating or resubmitting when a payer policy changes on that. And you're not going to recoup all of, poor choice of words, you're not going to take advantage of the backdating of some of those policies that can be really lucrative. They get together too. These claims adjusters get together at their own conferences. And when they compare notes, one is saying, well, we weren't paying it, but then we realized how much more we were paying in the ER instead of, primary care going in at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. If we're going to pay that differential to a pediatrician, that keeps them out of the ER. We're not paying nearly so much as we would if the kid went into the hospital. Yeah. So
I did end
everybody
the poll.
wins.
I did end
You
the
ended
poll,
the poll. What do our results look
13
like?
yes votes and 1 no vote.
Nice. See, so that one no vote is somebody who now recognizes that this group of people here and PCC and PedsOne are resources for discovering how to do a good appeal and how to make them easy, how to get good appeal templates and good verbiage and wording. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that poll on no notice at all.
Absolutely. So the zero payment report is not one that's on your system by default. I assume this is Dr. Schwartz, and she said staff up above. So if you want it, you will need to reach out. I will try to get a copy from a PedsOne client and send it out to software support so they're not inundated with requests for this report. I will already note for that.
Awesome. So if I don't see anything, I've got folks helping me stay on top of these questions. So if I'm overlooking anything, I absolutely do love a statement that was made. Payers are not clinicians and need to be reminded to stay in their lane. That just gets me fired up. This is the soapbox I jump on. So seeing somebody else jump on that with me, I know I'm not alone. Changing gears a tiny little bit. One of the bits of pushback that I see from folks currently when we're encouraging clients to continue, like not to let there be any interruption in their collections, specifically personal collections. The argument that I get is, or not specifically patient collections, but billing for telemedicine. One of the arguments that I get is my patients I'll have mutiny on my hands if I start charging patients for telemedicine. And some of the complication of that was early on, the carriers were saying that they were going to waive the patient responsibility, when in some cases they didn't actually mean waive. They meant, I'm going to put the decision in the clinician's hands and give them the responsibility of deciding whether to bill a copay. So it's not mandatory, but it's up to the doc. So they didn't carve it out. The carriers didn't make up the difference. They just made whose responsibility it was up to the doc. Typical. But do you guys have any suggestions or advice for practices who are concerned with the public relations effect of suddenly billing for something that customarily had been care that was rendered free of any patient cost? Are you guys running into that, and do you have any ideas? Heidi?
So far, I've been a little lucky where the patients that I've dealt with have been mostly understanding. I've, gotten that rare patient that was like, it was a 5-minute call. Of course, I pulled up the notes and it was a 25-minute call. But, it's in their head, it was a 5-minute call. But it's the same difference where you go into the office and they bill level 4 and the patient goes, I was only in there for 5 minutes and they barely did anything. And it's still going out as a contractual obligation. Not a contractual obligation, but if it's going out to a deductible or a copay or a coinsurance, I always recommend that they not adjust those off, because that is in their contract. We don't like to recommend that. The patients that I've talked to, I've had to explain, we're doing this as a courtesy to keep you safe and everyone safe by not having you come in the office, and you would have rendered the same care if you came in. You would have still gotten your copay. You would have still gotten your deductible and your coinsurance. We're treating all of our phone calls and videos like a normal office visit. The part that we are struggling with is the portal messages, because essentially they weren't billing for those until telemedicine, and now that's coming up. Do we bill? Do we not bill? But we're just relaying to the patients, like, this is essentially an office visit, even though it happened in your home, and we have to treat it that way, and we have to follow your insurance's recommendations, whether it go out to a deductible or a copay. And if it was a COVID-related symptom, I do make phone calls to follow up with the insurance companies to make sure that that wasn't put out to patient cost share by accident. I always offer to do that for the patient, just to reassure them instead of putting it back on them to do it. You just take that extra step to reassure them. I will make sure that this is actually the way it was supposed to be processed. And most of the time I've gotten positive feedback from that.
How about you, Lynn?
Isn't this a PedsOne question?
Well, I have an answer, but I'm not going to dominate.
Go ahead.
Dominate.
Answer.
Of course, you knew that I had something in the back of my mind when I asked this.
Of course I did.
Yeah, because the clinicians that say to me, no, that's it. I'm not going to bill for services. I'm not putting this on my patients. I'm not going to bill for services that I've been rendering all this time. The difference that I invite them to look at is that all this time in the past, pre-COVID, you had the luxury of being able to reach your HEDIS measures and your care quality measures without telemedicine. I don't know how, until carriers come up with, and boy, am I going to have a party the day that this happens, until there is an option for clinical reporting that is separate and distinct from billing, I cannot recommend that you not bill for this stuff. How else are you going to convince your carriers that you are maintaining the health of the patient base that has policies with them? So this is the way you prove HEDIS compliance. This is the way you earn your care quality incentive payments. This is the way you continue earning points toward reaching that platinum level payment rate. So that in and of itself, I find compelling. Also, when a clinician signs a contract with a payer, you promise to bill everything that's billable. You promise to bill for all of the services that you render. If you start picking and choosing at a time when they can logically assume that you're not seeing patients in your office, which that clinics are going way above and beyond for safety measures and making it safe to have inpatient or in-person visits. But during that iffy time, if they think that you just close down and abandon your patients, that's not awesome either. So I think there's a good middle ground. I think that you don't have to throw your patients to the wolves, but until you, and here I am banging this drum again, until you value your time, your patients aren't going to. And like Heidi said, their impression, their perception of time, 25 minutes of Q&A, history taking, making sure that you don't have any contraindications for drugs that you're considering, making sure that their family history is consistent with the therapy that you have in mind, that's tickling the back of your brain that you think you're going to recommend. That goes by in a flash for them. They don't recognize all of the thinking and planning and consideration that has to go into that. They're not trained the way that you are. So that's my plug for reconsidering the position that you draw that line in the sand and say you're simply not going to bill for services that aren't rendered face-to-face. It's a matter of survival now, but you have legitimate and really compelling arguments for doing it. And I hope you guys will value the service that you're rendering. You guys are putting your own safety in jeopardy in some cases to make sure that kids aren't going without care. Please, please, please get paid for it and make it possible to continue treating the next kid.
I do have to say that when you use the word "your insurance requires us to report this," they tend to take it off of the doctor and put their frustration more on their insurance companies. So instead of saying like, well, we chose to build a TB test out, if you say we're required to let your insurance know that we did this, whether or not they put it out to you, that's between you and your insurance contract. That has worked really well in the past too, is just using that word right there. And that seems to take it off of the doctors.
Yeah, I love that phrase. I'm so sorry your carrier did that to you.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. It puts it where it belongs. If I'm looking at a multimillionaire insurance CEO and a hometown pediatrician, who am I going to think has someone else's best interest at heart? That's a no-brainer for me. We've got a couple of points being shared in live session that I just want to pass on, that there's a practice that's there where the providers are doing a really great job explaining at the beginning of a telehealth visit that the insurance company is going to treat this as if they were in the office. So I can't recommend that highly enough. Is most disagreement stress is related to surprises. So any questions you can answer before they come up make the experience, that exchange with patients so much easier and better. And this practice presents it in the form of a question, so that the patient, it's clear to the patient, and the patient acknowledges understanding. So they make sure the patient understands carrier's going to do X. And that sets a tone when the clinicians are that generous with information and don't spring these surprises on patients. It makes life easier for the billers. When the experience starts good and stays good, you're not getting this pent up accumulation of frustration being let out on billers. And it's a repeated point. So the schedulers are saying it, the docs are saying it. By the time it gets to the billers, that this should be an idea that the patients and parents are used to. And just some support. Patients who dispute balances can be addressed with a temporary hardship policy. There's another relief valve. So if you've got folks that in my experience, clinicians have an inflated sense of how many self-pay patients, like purely self-pay patients, you have in your practice. I'd invite you to look at the data. Inevitably, when I ask folks to guesstimate, they guess a much higher percentage of their patients are uninsured than actually are. So getting a better sense of that is always helpful and helps you sleep a little better at night. But that temporary hardship policy is a suggestion in live chat. Why not? You can set that policy and say that for X number of months, you can pay nothing at all, or you agree to this policy to be paid by X date. I'm sure there are examples of those policies that can be shared as well for patients that simply cannot afford to pay currently. There is a question in live chat. And I think this follows up on when you say that the insurance carriers are requiring this. How do folks answer? Well, if the patient comes back and says, well, you were never required to do this before. So I think that's relating.
Welcome to COVID-19. It's a new world.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality is things are changing quickly, and what they required 2 months ago is going to be different than what they require now. We're seeing that, obviously. You guys are seeing that. So your patients are going to see that as well.
Good point. So we've got, believe it or not, this has been a really quick hour. We've got just not quite 15 minutes left together. Were there ideas that either of you wanted to be sure that I haven't touched on, that either of you really wanted to be sure that our participants today go home with, or shall we continue on with the crazy ideas that I came up with?
I have a recommendation for when you're calling on AR, and I know I've seen this struggle in the past, and you've called, this is now your third phone call to the insurance company, and they've said they were going to reprocess it. They haven't reprocessed it. You're calling a month later, they still haven't reprocessed it. And you're just getting that repetitive from the rep saying, I'll send it back. I'll send it back for expedition. You know, they don't do that. So my recommendation is, if you're struggling with getting a claim reprocessed or an appeal that's just been sitting around, instead of calling the same rep multiple times, I've had really good experiences with reaching out to my provider rep in those cases. If it's gone on 3 times now, 3 months you've called on it, it's going nowhere, take advantage of your provider reps and reach out to them and let them know, I really need help with this claim, because that's what they're there for. A lot of people don't use their provider reps as much as they should. And the other option is, if you're just getting the runaround a lot, is to also utilize your local AAP chapter, because they can go to bat for you on things that should be paid that are just not getting paid, codes that, you know, that should have been covered that are just getting denied over and over and over again, edits that haven't been fixed yet. I mean, there are other options rather than just calling the same toll-free number and getting the same type of rep over and over and over again.
That is a great point. Yeah, what I would like to piggyback on that and add that in addition to the AAP, the local chapter also has the assistance of the private payer advocacy group, and that's a national level group that they exist solely for this purpose, for negotiating. They get the ear, because they're national, they get the ear of the national insurance executives, and they're able to negotiate and make them aware. They can make the top level folks aware of problems that are widespread or repetitive. And another tool in that toolbox is your state banking and insurance commissioner. I will post at the end, after we're through here, I will post in live session a link to the current listing, the current directory of all state insurance commissioners. Sometimes all it takes is carbon copying them on an appeal or on a letter of request. You just put them in that little CC at the bottom, and that gets attention. And when it doesn't, you can follow up with that insurance commissioner. You may be surprised. Some states, the insurance communities are small enough that you might know somebody who knows somebody, and be able to either get some time with them, or, you know, for all you know, their kid plays soccer with your kid. You know, stranger things have happened. You may be able to get their attention and see if they can't make a recommendation or give you some advice on how to get a claim paid. The hassle, and I skipped before moving away from the AAP resources, the hassle factor form. If you guys have heard of that, I'll share the link to that as well. That's something that can be filled out when you've just met your limit, when you've done everything that you can, and you know that you're in the right and you need their assistance. They aggregate those. So at the national level, AAP will take all of the hassle factor forms, and when they start seeing hotspots and pockets of problems, they just like those services that you bill and aggregate and pull them together to get them paid. They get a critical mass of these claim payment problems to bring to insurance company executives and get those resolved.
So I want to, somebody mentioned in chat the exact same thing I was thinking with Heidi is provider rep. Who has a provider rep anymore? I have so many clients that they're like, we don't have a provider rep because they don't do it anymore. Like, I don't know why insurance companies don't have provider reps anymore, but there's many clients that I work with that, like, we just don't have one. So Heidi, is there a way they can get a provider rep, or some insurance companies just never going to allow it?
Some insurance companies don't. I know Aetna just doesn't have them anymore, and you have to call a generic number. So that's when I would reach out for extra help. But United Healthcare still does provider reps. We still have one through Cigna. The big ones, you'll still find them. The best way, I don't really know, because I've never really gone out to seek one. I've always just found out who my provider rep is by calling and getting transferred to 400 different people. But I find it. you can call the credentialing and contracting area, and they will typically be able to point you in the right direction of where you can find who your provider rep is if you don't know. But there are still insurance companies that have them, and they are still, you know, there. They're not all good. I'm not gonna lie. There's some really great ones, and there's some ones that you can email 400 times and they won't respond, and that's when you go to the AAP or you do the hassle factor for them, and there are ways around it. But if you have a good provider rep, you can get a lot done with that.
Good point. There's a question in chat.
I'm throwing a quick poll up, Jan, just to let you know.
Awesome. Okay. A question about the hassle factor form in particular. Can staff access that without logging in as a doctor? I know that to get to the form, you do need an AAP login. I'm not positive if non-clinical AAP logins, A, exist, or B, would work for this. Lou Terranova is the man's name that is the head of that private payer advocacy group. I have not reached out to, or I think I've reached out to him personally years ago, but we do have an email. If you find that it's really just too onerous to go through the AAP process for that, I will be happy to pass that feedback on and take suggestions for how they could improve it. They are super helpful. They're not looking to throw up barriers, so I'm fairly certain that they'd be open to suggestions or requests.
Brenna just let us know that it didn't work. Made her try to log in.
Yeah, I knew it was behind a login wall, but I'm not. Someone else in chat or one of you guys might know whether AAP has non-clinical logins. I think you have to be an MD to be a member. There are certain membership types that aren't MDs, but I don't know if they have access to that benefit. What else have we got?
I'm gonna end my poll because we're running out of time.
Yeah, we are. I like that question though.
All right, so 4 people are not charging no-show fees.
Do you have the total?
Out of 10.
Oh.
So 6 are and 4 are not.
So what's your curiosity about that?
I'm curious because we know no-shows have skyrocketed. So that was a curiosity point. Are you trying to collect those fees? Does it make sense to try to collect those fees? Are you reaching out to the people that are missing those appointments to find out why they're missing them? And if it was an in-person, seeing if you can replace them with a telemedicine visit. Because if they're no showing, yeah, I just wanted to know, Jan.
I've just got that raging curiosity.
Yeah, it's like it comes from the question that or the answer that Shauna had given about collecting and then no shows for telemed. I'm like, so are you charging for no shows for your telemed? And that would imply yes. So
cool. So we're getting answers in live session as well. There is a practice where the practice manager was able to create a login for the hassle factor form. So that's really good news. And there's a follow-up question about whether it costs anything. So we'll take a look at that and share. I'm sure Tommy was the PM that was able to create the login. So,
yeah.
North Carolina, NCPS, North Carolina
Pediatric Society.
Pediatric Society. Nice.
I'm just making that up, Tommy.
That
you
could
can
very well
correct
be right.
us, but
that's better than the non-guesses that I had.
I could come up with some really weird acronyms or
descriptions
for that acronym.
Being an employee at PCC, we have our share of exposure to really interesting acronyms. PCC is a very popular acronym somehow. We are the Presbyterian Canadian community. We are there's no shortage of them. There's a practice also that had waived their no-show fee the first month of COVID, but are now doing double duty on reminders again. So making sure to get back in that habit. And I think I have exhausted the prompts and questions that I had. Any final thoughts from either of you?
Thank you, James, Portland Community College. There's so many more than that, James. There are so many PCC acronyms out there. People contacting us at PCC, and it's not for us. But anyway, so the first no-show you don't charge. Second and after you do, yep. That's probably what you had previously. Yeah.
That's a popular one.
Yep.
a lot.
I personally would charge them right from the beginning, but that's just me.
Well, it sounds humane. It's warming people up to it. You know, you gotta change behaviors before you can expect improvements. So, well, all right. It doesn't look like there are a ton of new questions coming through. The conversation is awesome, which I hope that'll continue. Just because we're not going to be on video anymore doesn't mean that we can't continue sharing. There is just like every other session, there is a survey that you can fill out to help us understand whether the way that we did this was helpful to you, to make suggestions for improvements. Tell everybody how desperately you want Heidi back again. We were really lucky to have Heidi this year. I'm really glad that you participated. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
It really was. The hour goes so quickly. I wish we had more time, but
We never do.
We never do.
I'm always happy to answer questions too. If somebody shoots me an email and they're really stuck with something, I love doing that. So
awesome. You're super generous. Thank you.
And your email is Heidi?
It is. It's Heidi at PedsOne.com.
See, if you're going to offer that, you got to share your email address. My email address is jim@pcc.com. That's JIM. Just shoot him an email.
You are incorrigible. So with that, we are going to sign off. And as I said, continue on. Don't let the live session chat go, and don't let it end. Make sure you get your questions in there. And this is just the beginning of the crowdsourcing. You guys are each other's best resource, and we will chime in as is necessary and invited. So we will see you in chat and at the next
3 p.m.
Yeah, the next session, 3 p.m. What would that session be, Lynn?
I think it has something to do with insurance billing workflows. Maybe.
Something like that. I think
something like that.
Some Lynn person is teaching.
Yeah.
So,
questionable knowledge base there, but we get what we can.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So everybody come on back at 3 o'clock and Lynn will impart more knowledge. We'll have some more Q&A at the end, and we'll keep running this as long as you all keep showing up. Thank you so much for being here, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.